سبحانك مولانا لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So we resume where we left off last week. We covered Sunnah, I think lesson 18, the divisions or categories of Sunnah. We talk about there's three types of Sunnah in terms of its linguistic, usuli, and tahawulat. So these three meanings in three different fields. So today we resume to the next lesson, lesson 19, classification of the consecutive stages according to the Sharia. So this is part of what we call the Fiqh of Ar-Rabt Bain Diyana wa Tarikh, linking history and religion, which involves reading history or classifying historical stages according to the marhala that we have, according to the marhala that is comes in the prophetic traditions. So based on the prophetic traditions, you have first and foremost the prophetic era. Okay. So unlike the Western classification of history, where they classify history based on their experience, based on their like those classical, medieval, middle age, ancient. So this is their classification. It's not our classification. So their classification is based on their experience as a civilization, like what they go through, right? What they go through in their civilization. So for our civilization, the Muslim civilization, right, we go through different marahil, different marhala. So it says here, when we study the diverse signs and patterns of the last hour, we must know that how the Sharia categorizes them in accordance with their consecutive stages. So this is all taken from the prophetic Sunnah. So firstly, the major signs bear no relationship to the initial stages. The major signs begin with the times of Mahdi to the end of human existence. And secondly, the intermediate signs begin with the sending of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and ends with the conclusion of the second Sufyanic period. So this is the intermediate sign. And so thirdly, the minor signs begin with the birth of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and will continue until the moment the trumpet is blown. So the prophetic period is the beginning of the intermediate signs, and that ends with the Sufyanic period. Thirdly, the minor signs begin with the birth of the Prophet Muhammad and will continue until the moment the trumpet is blown. So that means the minor sign is the most extensive one, right? The minor sign stretches all the way. So I've given some analogy last time about signs being something like symptoms of, like disease or penyakit kan. If you're sick, you have minor illness, you have intermediate kind of illnesses or sicknesses, disease, and then you have those major illnesses, like chronic kind of illnesses that signify or signify impending death. So we are the microcosmos, right? We are microcosmos. So you have the macrocosmos, which is the world. So the universe is a macrocosmos, and we are a reflection of it. We are the microcosmos. So we reflect what is there out there in the universe. The universe has minor, intermediate, and major signs. We, as a human being, right? We also have our sa'ah. We also have our death, the moment of our last hour. So whoever died, his sa'ah has come. Right? That's one of the meaning of sa'ah lah, the hour, right? So all these signs occur non-chronologically in various times and places and can only be identified by their signs and dalalah, indication. On the basis this inductive reading, we provide a general division of these different stages in accordance with their legal definition as taken from the words of the Prophet. So they are period of prophecy. the first and foremost. Of course, this is, if we look at it, we are looking at only those marhala after the prophets being sent. There are periods before the prophet all the way up to Nabi Adam alayhi salam, which we call istiqra'iyah, right? Marhal istiqra'iyah, right? During the time of the prophet is istidlaliyah, and then what the prophet foretold us, istibakiyah. So the period of the prophecy, this is all within istidlaliyah and the istibakiyah. So the period of prophecy, revelation, infallibility, inimitable miracle. So this is the hasanah. It is immune in the sense that there is impunity, there is immunity in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So within this period of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are minor signs, right? As we said, minor signs stretches from beginning to end, and then there are also intermediate signs, right? So the prophets being sent, right? There are hasana in his miracles, in his infallibility, in the fact that there are wahyu coming down to guide us, right? His marhala itself is divided into the Makkiyah and the Madaniyah. So the Makkiyah, there is his ilm and his hal, meaning he imparts his knowledge, and there is his state, which becomes our means of guidance, his akhlaq, by which he treats, or by which he deals or interacts with the people around him. And then we have marhala of the Madinah period, right? And this is during which Rasulullah SAW did a lot of tahsin. But this tahsin, he mentioned a lot of things about his companions during this Madinah period. Yeah, he will for example basically during the building of the mosque in Madinah, right? When Abu Bakr was carrying the brick, and then after that Omar came with the brick, and then Uthman came with the brick to put on the walls of the mosque. He said these people, these few of them, they will take over the caliphate after me, right? So there is tahsin in that. During that time, during the Madinah period, he mentioned a lot about his companions, who are the ones that are have a kind of immunity in them, their uprightness. He guaranteed their uprightness. And then we have the next one is marhala. His death, the Prophet's death, right, was also a minor sign. Is an intermediate sign. Right? The death of the Prophet ﷺ is considered a intermediate sign. So I think in the last level, we talk about intermediate signs are always related to al-ilm wal hukum, right? So there is a change when the death of the Prophet, there is a change in the hand of the rulership, right? From the Prophet ﷺ, the leadership transferred to the Khulafa. So there is a handover of leadership, and hence it's considered a intermediate sign, alamatul wusta, right? So the death of the Prophet itself is one of the intermediate signs, right? And then he mentioned it a lot, right? Man naja min thalath faqad naja. Whoever is saved from 3, right, will be saved. One of it is he mentioned is what? His death, because of the and the fitnah lah, basically the power, so-called people, different groups wanted to take over the leadership. Okay, then we have the period of the Khulafa al-Rashida, and here it says that it is textually stated immunity. It is a prophetic text that guaranteed that this period, right, is a khilafah ala manhaj al-nubuwah. There is a khilafah that follows upon the prophetic way. Right? The many narrations, right, that said there are guaranteed this period, right, this marhala. And there's also a narration that but specifically mention about the period, how long it is going to be, right? 30 years. 30 years of Khulafa Rashidun reign, right? Al-Khilafatu Nubuwah 30 sana thumma yu'tillah al-mulka aw mulkahu man yasha. Right? The Khilafah of prophethood is 30 years, then Allah SWT give the kingdom to whomever He wills, right? And this is in Sunan Abu Dawud. Sunan Abu Dawud, Hadith 4646. So this is specifically mentioning, right, the 30 years. I think I give it the slide so you have there, right? In the last level, you have all the details there. Okay, so the protection is ijtihad, prophetic nas. They have ijtihad. The khulafa, they are protected in their ijtihad. Their mawqif, right? Ijtihad and their mawqif. So within this period, there are also intermediate and minor signs. What are the intermediate signs? For example, the conquest of Baitul Maqdis in the time of Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu. Right? So the opening of Baitul Maqdis is a intermediate sign. Right? There is a narration, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "U'dud sittan baina yaday sa'ah." Count 6 before the hour. One of it he mentioned is Fatha Baitul Maqdis, the opening or the conquest of Baitul Maqdis. Right? So, and there are other signs also, because obviously Baitul Maqdis is a very major victory, right? It is related to hukum, rulership, and amongst the minor signs in this period, intermediate signs in this period are the murder, the assassination of all the caliphs lah, basically the assassination of Sayyidina Umar, the assassination of Sayyidina Uthman, right? Assassination of Sayyidina Ali. So all of this, right, are considered intermediate because they are related to rulership, right? It is a fitna, right? And it is mentioned by the prophetic text as well, right? So the murder of Osman, right? We mentioned before, Sayyidina Umar asked the murder of Sayyidina Umar. It was mentioned by Hudhaifa al-Yaman, right? There's a door between you, Umar, and the fitna. Sayyidina Umar asked him, will the door be open or broken? He said it will be broken. So they know from that, they know that it is not gonna close. If it's broken, it cannot be closed. If it's open, it can be closed. So they know that it is the murder of Sayyidina Umar. And then the murder of Uthman radiallahu anhu also mentioned in the prophetic text. Murder of Sayyidina Ali as well. All of it. Inshallah, we'll read them in the Usus al-Wal Mutalaqat. If you want, you can find them there. Okay. So that is the time of the Khulafa ar-Rashidun. And then we go to the Mulkul Adud. So after the period of the Khulafa ar-Rashidun, we have the Bani Umayyah. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Mulkul Adud in the narration, right? And this Mulkul Adud, it covers both the Abbasids, right, and the Umayyads. So you can see here. Okay, but did he mention Umayyad specifically? Right, the reign of the Umayyads? Yes, he also mentioned the Umayyad specifically. He mentioned, right, in a narration, he says, right, Khilafa Nubuwah 30 sana thumma yu'tillahu al-mulka aw mulkahu man yasha. And then he mentioned specifically Bani Umayyah. He said, Ta'awwadhu billahi min ra'si sab'in wa min imarati sibyan. So he said, seek refuge in Allah. Seek refuge with Allah from the beginning of the 70. Beginning of 70 of the Hijri year. And the leadership of the young people, these youth, these Sibyan, kids. India, he's using a figurative language lah, of course, to denote them as immature, right, spiritually. And another narration, and Abi Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu qala Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ra'aitu Bani al-Hakam yanzuna ala minbari kama tanzul kiradatu. So he said, I saw Bani Hakam yanzuna ala minbari, creating a mess in my mimbar, right, like monkeys. So this is Bani Hakam is the ancestor of the basically the children of the Umayyads, basically referring to the Umayyads. And said the narrator said, "Fama ru'iya Nabiyyu sallallahu alaihi wasallam dahikan hatta tufiya." So he said, we do not see the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam smiling until he died. After he was granted this vision. So this is another specific mention of Bani Umayyah, right? Which that they will take up the Khilafah, or they will become the rulers, right? So it's immunity. There is hasana. There is some kind of protection in that era, right? Because there is establishment of jihad, right? So this is because the establishment of jihad constitutes something that is important, right, in maintaining the rulership, right, the power hegemony of the Muslims. And there's another immunity, right? The established struggle to defeat enemy in the cause of Allah, to preserve and protect the essence of Islam. So during this period, the intermediate and minor signs can be found. Right? The intermediate signs that happened during Bani Umayyah includes, one of which is the murder of Sayyidina Hussein. Right? The Karbala event, this is one of the intermediate signs in this period. And the event of Al-Harra, the siege of Medina. Okay, this is the siege of Medina, the massacre of the inhabitants of Medina, right, during that period of the Umayyads, which constitute a intermediate signs. So these are all, if you look at them, they are all about struggle for power, political turmoil, conflicts, right? But that doesn't mean that this period is completely bad, right? There are nas that tanafusat, we call it, like a period of a period of relief in the Khilafah of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Right? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, there was a narration that informed of his appearance or his rule, which he is descendant of Sayyidina Umar. So during his rule, people thought that he was Al-Mahdi, right? Because of there was so much prosperity, there was so much justice, right? So to the extent that they thought he was the Mahdi, right? But they didn't. Some of the scholars among them said that no, right? He is not the Mahdi. Okay, so next we have the period of the Abbasids. So also again, it is still in the Mulkul Adud period. So some of them, Abu Bakr said that Mulkul Adud could be that it is stretched out until the Al-Ghutha. Because if you look at it from the perspective of the fact that all of this rulership are not based on the similar model of the Khulafa ar-Rashidin, right? They are based on dynasty, right? They are based on that desire for power, right? It is not based on election or shura, or the fact that they are desirous, the fact that they are holding onto it, the families, the dynasties, they are clinging onto it. The adud, one of the meaning is to firmly clench and bite onto something. So if you look at these dynasties, right, these monarchies, they are very, very firmly gripping onto the power, right? They wouldn't give it up easily. Unlike our Khulafa ar-Rashidun, they were not really, like that. Right? Sayyidina Hassan easily, or rather he gave it up, abdicate the throne or the caliphate, right, to avoid bloodshed. So Mulkul Adud, you might say that it is stretches all the way until the Ghutha. Okay, so but of course there are periods where you have noble and just kings, noble and just rulers who the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam have he has already informed us of their coming. So Mulkul Adud of Abbasid, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned, Wailul lil ummati min Bani al-Abbas. Inna li Bani al-Abbas la rayatan la turad. So woe unto my ummah from Bani Abbas. Right. So this is like an isharah, indication of their what they will take up in the future from their leadership position, right? So inna li Bani Abbas la rayah, they have a flag, they have like a kind of a leadership role which cannot be rejected, which cannot be pushed away. So indeed there are intermediate and minor signs during the time of the Abbasid periods as well. Right, so next we go to the period of the petty states, the splitting of the caliphate, which begins with the Mongol invasion, right? The Tatars, they shredded the Muslim caliphate, broke it up. So the Abbasid caliphate weakened, and the Baghdad was sacked by the Mongols, right? And then you have all these Seljuks empire, Seljuk kingships, or those states, right? Seljuk states emerging, and then you have the Fatimids, you have the Umayyad in Spain, right? Andalus. So there was what you can say a rupture. There was a fragmentation of the Muslim empire, and hence there was no stability, right? So the immunity of this period was disturbed. There was disturbance. There was a lot of wars. There was, no proper single united front against the Mongols. And so the intermediate and minor signs can also be found in this period. Of course, the ransack or the sack of Mongols in Baghdad is itself a intermediate sign. The killing of the Khalifa, right? The killing of the ulama, and so on and so forth. So there was a period of return of stability after that. So in between this, there are many things that happen, amongst which is the emergence of the Crusades, the Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, right? Reconquest of Jerusalem, right? And you have emergence of there's a battle of Ain Jalut, right, between the ruler of the Muslim ruler Qutus. His name is Qutus, and he won the battle, right? And then there was the Seljuks emerging, the Ottoman states or the Ottoman Empire emerging, right? And they were, in some ways, there was immunity, right, by the conquering of the Constantinople by the text of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And then there was a restoration of Qarar. Here he translates as right to make decisions. In a way, you can also say there is a restoration of the hegemony of power, right? The spread of power, or the control of power in the Muslim hands, right, in the Ottoman Empire. So that Ottoman Empire increased, they rose up, they were at their peak, right, at Sultan Sulaiman the Magnificent, right? And then you see that there was the peak lah. So basically, that was the point where the empire was at its peak in terms of its the amount of land that they rule. At the same time, right, their might and so on. And so, of course, everything that goes up must come down. So there was a gradual decline. There was a gradual decline until, right, they start to the European powers, right, began to have their industrial revolution, right? The Orientalism began, and that is what we call the period of the Ghutha starts then, right? The Ahlas, Istikbar, Istizhar. This is marked by the industrial revolution, So this is that period, right? So they have the istikbar, which we mentioned. And you can look at a footnote in the book, right? What is meant by istikbar? Proud, the pride, the arrogance that comes along with power, right? With the industrial revolution. So this is the beginning of the Huthaiyah, right? Until today, we are still in the Huthaiyah, right? We are still many and weak, right? So this was the beginning of it. Istizhar is the period of attempts to penetrate Islamic world by Orientalism and military means. So Ahlas, right? We mentioned about the word Ahlas. Why is it called Ahlas? Because this period, it stretches, like how the cloth stretches, right? How it remains long. So this come from the word helis. Helis, something that is stretched under the clothes, which also has an indication of secrecy, right? Secrecy, right? So there was a secret. What is the secrecy? The secrecy is in the plots, the conspiracies in trying to bring down the Ottoman Empire. Basically, there were a lot of these attempts to bring down the Ottoman Empire, and soon it became the problem of the East, they call it, al-Mas'alah al-Sharqiyah, and it became called the Tarikah al-Rajul al-Marid, the inheritance of the sick, aged old man. They call the Ottoman Empire the old man, aged old man. So it's called Ahlas because of it stretches for a long period of time. This is the opinion of Al-Khattabi. So over many generations, right, this fitnah of istikbar, istizhar, right, it stretches for a long period of time, many generations. And then we have As-Sarra, right? Within As-Sarra, there is colonialism and secularism. So eventually, the weakening of the Muslim Ottoman Empire result in the colonization of many parts. Like they lost Egypt, they lost, right, to Napoleon, right, and the secularization process began. So they brought their ideas, right, the Enlightenment, the ideas of secularism. They brought it to the what do you call it, Arab Islamic lands. So this Sarra, again, it is has a meaning of secrecy, has a meaning of, so it's one of the periods of Huthaiyah. There was a conspiracy, Arab leaders trying to overthrow the Ottoman Empire, right? We learned about it, about the Sharif, right? And there's a narration about him in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa fitnatu sarra yakhruju dakhnuha min tahti qadamai rajulin yaz'umu annahu minni wa laysa minni. Okay, so I think I mentioned that in my slides. You can look at the slides in the last level. You can look at the details there. And so this is fitnah of sarra. Within this period, of course, there are also the intermediate and minor signs. And then we have duhaima, al-istihtar, al-almana. Within the period of intermediate and minor signs are found. So this is thereafter where you have nationalism, right, emerging of all these nation states, right, when the Ottoman Empire has been cut out by the Sykes-Picot Agreement. This French and British, they had this Sykes-Picot Agreement where they cut the Arab lands into different nation states. Until today, you see there's no unity. Every state has its own interest. Every state is like, they do not have that unity anymore, right? And they call the Palestinian issue as a Palestinian issue. So it's no longer a Muslim issue. Right? So they frame it as such, right? And you can see beginning from 1948 until today, 75 years, you still have no resolution of. So it is all framed in nationalistic terms, right? So that this end of Duhaima will be culminate. There's a culmination in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Fala yazaluna kazalika hatta yasiru ila fustatain." They will remain like that until people will become two groups. Will be divided. Will divide themselves into two groups. One group which has pure iman without any hypocrisy, and another group, right, with pure hypocrisy without any iman, right? If they, and when they are like that, right, then you shall wait for Dajjal on the day itself or the next day. So that means once you reach this period, then once you reach that point of time where you can see people clearly their hypocrisy, right? If you want to know, like, what is the dawabit, what is the yardstick to, of hypocrisy and iman, you can look at Surah Taubah. Surah Taubah is like the what do you call it, the exposure of, or the exposing of the characteristics of hypocrisy. You can read Surah Taubah, look at the meanings, look at how hypocrites, how they behave when they are called to jihad, when they are called to fight, when they are called to look at their behavior, look at their stances, and look at the stances of those who believe, right, in the face of fitnah, in the face of challenges. So you can see how believers behave, how hypocrites behave. From there, which, fustat, right, a particular individual or group or country belong to, right? So yeah, Allahu alam bisawab. I shall stop here for today. We shall go on to this Luhaima in more detail, this part onwards, right? Inshallah, next lesson. Right? Any questions? Okay, if no questions, we end today. Subhanakallah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Barakallahu fiik.
Barakallahu fikum. Assalamualaikum.